Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. And on the show today, we have a special guest. Alex Ball, one of the amazing hosts of the Noto Market Garden podcast, is going to join us today to talk about moving farms. He will help me tackle a question about how much land one could handle for a part-time farm. And we'll talk about what questions about farming are on his mind. So let's do it. Alex Ball, welcome to Growers Daily.
I'm excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of the show, and I'm excited to finally be back and chat with you about the farm.
I'm super excited to have you. Let's just kick it off with a little bit of information about yourself so people can kind of know who you are. Maybe they know you as a host, but maybe they don't know you quite as a farmer. So tell us a little bit about your farm and where you are located.
Yeah. So again, I'm Alex Ball on Old City Acres. We're located in Southeast Michigan in a small college town called Ypsilanti, right on the Huron River. We are a kind of a small auto college town, so kind of a weird, kooky place. But we do a year-round, four-season flat CSA. We do some markets, a little bit of wholesale, a little bit of everything, kind of traditional market garden. But our big thing is again that year-round production.
Nice. Okay, so you said also there's some auto industry there too. Is that like, I kind of just think of that as Detroit, but that's kind of spans Michigan? Maybe give
Yeah,
us a little context there because I guess I don't really know the industry up there.
Yeah, so South Michigan, you have Detroit, kind of the auto hub center, but sprawling out from there for like an hour in every direction is the auto industry from all different angles, right? So there's plants that just do shipping of vehicles. There's yards that are just doing manufacturing of axles, of plastic inlays. So these high industries, just tiny as it sprawls out through our entire southeast part of our state. Like the town I grew up in, there's 4 auto plants there. Like my dad worked in the plant, your uncle worked, your grandparents, everyone works in the plant. That's kind of the normal thing to do here.
Wow. Okay, so you just moved farms though, correct?
I did, yeah. So
Okay.
I've been served. Yeah, for folks who don't know, I have had a pretty wild farmland adventure. So the first 5 years of our farm, we got pushed every single year to a new location, and then we're finally able to find this piece of property, and it was like the wettest piece of property to ever find. And I spent $50,000 plus draining it, making it work, trying to grow that into a usable market garden. But it got to a place where we could not make it work. We could not invest enough money, enough labor, enough time to make it work. So last year we had a huge flood that was the worst one we'd seen, almost 10 years in the area, and lost everything. And in the same season had a huge hailstorm that spring and lost everything. So I had been leveraged super heavy on my business, and with these 2 huge disasters, I decided that I personally couldn't beat the land anymore. We had to find drier land. So now I'm renting a piece of property closer to my home, actually right in town, right down the street from my apartment that we farm at now.
And how far away from your original property is that?
Yeah, so from town to personal property was about 25 minutes to get there and back. And now in town it's like 7. It's right here. So I also rent like a warehouse space in our downtown area, and that's where we do all of our CSA packing and distribution. Majority of our customers kind of live like in a 2-3 square mile radius of that hub area, so it's more economic for us to pack a little bit closer to town. Especially when the farm was further away. But now the farm is maybe 4 minutes from the packing location. So
Yeah.
it's not too far from way. It's, again, we're right in town. And for folks who clearly don't know the area, so along the Huron River, you have all these little kind of towns that popped up around the river. And if you go 5 minutes south of all of them, you're in prime farmland. You're ready to go. So there's a lot of farming in the area. It's a very local food centered area in the sense of it's very working class, but there's a lot of working class people are also involved in agriculture, or their families have been at some point.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good to think that you didn't have to completely rebuild your customer base after moving.
Yeah, and actually our customer base grew quite a bit because even though I live in Ipsy, sell in Ipsy, markets were in Ipsy, our farm was down the street. So for SEO and for search engine optimization, when people looked us up, we would get pinged in the town next over. and even though it wasn't our market. So now that the farm has a mailing address that aligns with the customer base that we're mainly serving, when people search for us, we pop up much, much higher on all the lists. So it was a huge advantage when we that move.
Wow. Okay, so I've moved. I thought I'd moved a lot of times, but having to move basically every year in your first 5 years is out of control. That's wild.
Yeah, it's asinine.
And then yeah, and then putting that much money into a property, and then having to move from that property. Also, that's got to be so hard. And
Yeah.
I guess my question or my thought is like, what have you learned in this experience, both maybe about searching for property, but also about starting a farm or moving a farm that you feel like would be helpful for people to know?
Yeah, I think that the first thing you have to do is decide what do you really want. And when I first started farming, I wanted to be a farmer, but I equated that to I wanted to be a landowner, if that makes sense, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I put all of my eggs into the basket of I want to build this property out. I want to have a place that we sit down on, that we have some long-term equity, that I can pass down or whatever, right? And I quickly realized that I didn't want to be a landowner and a land manager. I wanted to be a food producer. And those aren't always the same thing. I like living in town. I like being around my friends. I don't go out very much. I like being around things that are happening. And for me, living on the farm wasn't really my dream. And that's something that I really fully wanted. But I told myself, well, to be a farmer, I had to have this piece of land. I had to have this place. And now that I've been able to build up, let's say, my social capital in the community, granted, I've grown up here, I've lived here my entire life, so I have quite a bit of social capital already in place. But when I decided to then transition from ownership to leasing, I'm now in I'm in a long-term, low-cost lease that is like 5% of what I was paying to own farmland, right? So I took me almost a decade to find a piece of land like that, but having the situation set up that way, I'm now not spending all of my labor on property management, on uh, on uh, on all the capital it takes to actually own and run a piece of property. So I've really been able to. I tell people all the time, you have to be very certain what you want to do. What is your long-term goal? Is your goal to have that perfect rural lifestyle where we stay all a week long, go to the market one day a week? Is your dream to develop a marketplace? Whatever it has to be, but you can't just say, oh, owning land will fix all those things. Because I was in a situation where I was so land unstable that I convinced myself that owning land was the only way to stabilize my business. But really, it just kind of like gave me some quicksand to sit in for for a few years to try to calm down. And I found that if I'd taken all that capital I'd put into developing that property and put that in just growing my business, increasing, let's say, markets we did, or our revenue, or put it into things that grew revenue for the business, we would have been much further ahead in the long term. It's a lesson I learned, and I learned about land management and draining and all that kind of stuff in that process. And I even do consulting jobs for it now, so I got some skills from that. But if I was trying to grow the idea of being a food producer, I've been much better suited investing in a food producing business, not in a land management project.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's fascinating because, I it's easy enough for me to be like, "Oh, you should rent your land." And then people would be like, "Well, you own yours." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's really brutal. I kind of wish I rented instead." Like but it's nice to hear somebody who's gone through that process and landed on like, "No, I'm kind of choosing renting." Like I think that's a very valuable perspective to hear like, "No, it is actually like a viable way of doing this."
Yeah, yeah, and the thing is, I'll say this, I'm 30 years old. I'm a classic millennial, right? A lot of my friends, and I have a lot of friends who also owned homes and have now sold those homes and are now renting, back to renting, because again, they were sold this idea that to be stable, to be an adult, the next state phase in life is owning a home, and they quickly realize that they don't make enough revenue in their daily jobs to then take care of a home, or any extra time they do have is now caught up in property management. And I would say this: that at one point, I was managing my farm property, my home, and then my grandparents' home. So I was managing three properties, and at a certain point, my life was a mower. That's what I was doing. And it's like no one's paying me to mow. I'm spending fuel and riding around. My back hurts now when I should be growing food. So yeah, I'm very happy to be a place now where I don't have to take on that labor of owning a home or owning the property itself. But there have been some downsides I found to the leasing, to the renting, and part of that is that your equipment and a lot of your things have to be kind of adjusted and dialed towards, let's say, a more transient nature of the business. Like all of our refrigeration's all on wheels. We have walk-in coolers and trailers, walk-in coolers in a box truck, and I just put a down payment on a wash pack kind of like farm stand on wheels as well. So everything we're doing now is kind of shifting towards that more flexible idea. And I'm now at a point in my business where flexibility is the real power that I think that we have. And as like an undercapitalized first generation farmer, right, I'm not going to be able to leverage the idea of generational land. At that point, that the idea of generational land is you sit down, you keep double investing, and you keep growing. But when you don't have any assets and you're kind of on the fringe of let's say a local food economy, you have to be very agile and be willing to find your place and move around and find that spot where you really belong in. Because again, the area we're in is hyper competitive. We have lots and lots and lots of great farmers in the area, and Michigan is a huge ag state, not just small scale grower, but we're one of the most diverse ag states in the country. California number two. So it's like there's lots of options. There's like hundreds of multi-thousand to 100 acre tomato farms. It's a huge scaled operation here. So there's a lot of local food happening. So you really have to be agile, I think, to really find your place.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know that about Michigan. I'm also fascinated by the wash pack trailer that you put the down payment on. Is it a prefabricated, already ready to go wash pack that's in a trailer? Like what is that?
Yeah, so this is something that is the custom build that I found in a barn, and an hour and a half away from here, off Marketplace. But it's basically a 30-foot long, like food truck trailer, like a concession trailer. One third of it is a walk-in cooler. One third is like a showroom type farm stand area. And then the other third is a triple sink wash station and like stainless steel tables and like basically like a food truck.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it was when they built it, it was like over 100 grand to build this thing. But it's a very niche tool. Like I've looked at it, it's a thing that you'd only need for very certain type of operations. It's a huge walk-in cooler in it. Like why do you need that for a normal food truck? It's
Yeah.
not normal. So like they've been had sitting on it for a while. They couldn't sell it because like they couldn't find a customer for this. But for a small scale farm, it's like, oh, it was exactly perfect what we needed. It has generators built into it, has a bathroom already in it. All the small things you kind of need to like jumpstart a wash pack. So that's kind of what we're now moving toward, and that all that making everything as mobile as possible, so that then if opportunity comes up to find a good piece of property to sell at, we'll just pick it up and move it there if we need to.
That's very cool. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we will get a question from one of our Patreon members. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. If you, the listener, wants to support our work, you can do so at patreon.com/NoToGrowers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come from, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. Today's question comes from Chris Smith, who asks, as someone who is sticking to part-time farming while working full-time doing something else, it would be great to hear about what scale people found sustainable and what strategies they use to manage their time and stay relatively sane. Alex, I'll put that to you first.
Yeah. Basically, what scale do you need to be at, or how do you maintain that? maintain that lifestyle. I kind of found that for us, I've interviewed about this, about how do you balance growth of sales with just being sane as a person, right? And I found that at our farm, we got past that a quarter acre, three-quarter acre scale with one person. We had to bring on more people, we had to bring on more labor, and I constantly kept pushing back between paying that labor out and then scaling down a little bit and keeping that money as income. We kept balancing out constantly. So I feel like, making that jump to the full scale is such a risky move. But if you can, push past it and at least get some of those workers, get some of those workers somewhat positively, push some capital back too, if that makes sense. Like right here locally, we want to pay our workers a solid wage, but at the same time, we have so much competition from nonprofit farms and other farms who are not capital tied, who either A, pay super high wages, or B, have super low pricing. You kind of hit on both ends of that. So I really think that to make that jump to a full time, you really have to make sure there's a local demand for it, and not just this demand you think is there. Because at certain times we tried to push into that larger scale and have gotten caught really badly. Like last year, we scaled quite a bit, were really leveraged on capital, and then you have 4 or 5 loans out, and all of a sudden you hit with a flood or a hail or storm, something like that, and all of a sudden you're not being able to pay that off. But yeah, I maybe answer a little better. Is there anything else maybe you want to hear more about that?
Yeah, I also, I think, I think this question could go in a couple different ways, because maybe they're wanting to stick to part-time and wondering like how far they can push it, like part-time farming, and wondering how far they can push that, or like that could also just be an interesting thing. Like how, when it comes to part-time farming, like what is a reasonable scale for somebody? And I think, for me, it's, you've got to pick 1 or 2 things and specialize in them and just make it a very easy routine. That you see a lot of people who just have a microgreens business or a small mushroom business, or, maybe even like egg layers or something, that it's like you get up, you do that one task every day, you do the handful of things that you have to do for that. Maybe you send out an email to the chefs that usually buy from you, and then you move on from that. Like, I don't know, do you have any thoughts in terms of maybe just like that sort of finding a good scale for a part-time gig?
Yeah. So it's funny you say. It's funny that I'm thinking about that. Is that as we transitioned to our farm, we went from a primarily mixed veg CSA that kind of did all the components of the CSA, and we slowly morphed that into like a pretty solid greens business and a flat CSA that buys in products from other farms. So right now we're pretty dialed down into doing salad mix, spinach, head lettuce, bok choy, curly kale, sweet peppers, and then we do cherry tomatoes, and we just do those crops. Every once in a while, maybe do a pole bean, but just do those few crops there, and we produce those in large amounts, and then wholesale the rest out, and then feed the rest of that into our CSA. And we kind of found really quickly, especially when we were a full mixed veg CSA on about half an acre, is that we had all this labor that got tied up in like weekly picking of zucchini, weekly picking of like all these lower value crops that round our CSA out, that were just like huge time sucks that, if we had cut all those out, we would quickly went from a full-time farm down to semi part-time, but the amount of money we were making was relatively much higher, because we weren't being filled with all these lower value tasks. So I totally agree. You got to find out what you specialize in, and I kind of find you've got to have just 2 or 3 really good outlets. If you can find a few or 3 good outlets, to push your product either through an online source that you run, mixed with a low input, maybe self-serve farm stand, and maybe a few wholesale accounts. If you can really streamline those things down, then I think you really could make a good at it part-time. But I think you mentioned it a while ago, Jesse, is like the older I get in my business, the more and more I want other sources of income flowing into my farm that aren't just, or in my life in general, that just aren't produce based. And I know that as farmers, all I want to do is grow food, but also like at my old farm, when we're sitting there and the whole fields are underwater and we have this little cabin that we're renting out, I'm like, dang, why aren't I renting this cabin out too? Get some income flowing when there's no produce coming off the farm for the next 2 months. So I think you can really stack those functions on a small scale farm, and make a decent living part-time farming. I think also have a more enjoyable time part-time farming, because like I think you really need to be honest about yourself and where you come from and what your goals and what your possibilities are. For me personally, like I come from very working class neighborhoods, working class families with no previous land or capital to put into my business. So I understand that like if I fall, the run right below or failure is is homelessness. You know what I mean? There's a run that's there really quickly, and if that next rung isn't being unhoused, then yes, you can maybe play around and do more things, but you have to be really realistic about what you want to do. And I think especially if you're going to be balancing other people in your lives who maybe aren't on the farm, who don't have that same agricultural dream, that like having a good balanced life and having that part-time farming might actually be the best option. And I'll end with one thing, is that just because you're part-time farming doesn't mean the other job can't be local food as well. And I think I would describe myself personally as that my vegetable farm is part-time, and then I also do another farming project where we do aggregated local food product boxes. And I work in that as well, and I own both of those businesses. But it's like, is half my time on the farm? Yes. Other half the time is distributing food. Yes. Are they farming altogether? They are. But my full-time job isn't harvesting and cutting lettuce. It's a mix of other local food things as well. So I tell folks, it's nothing. There's no shame in like finding other routes inside the local food scene to put yourself into. And I often find that like the more I diversify forms of income I have coming in, just the more stable the business is going to be, and more stable my life is going to be. I feel like in the end.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel very strongly that this is a ludicrous business to like go all in on, right? Like it can be, you can get it all wiped out in a day. But there is the beauty of it, is that a community will often come together and support you, but you do have to do the community development part, get the people to love what you're doing and believe in you and need it. And and I just think like that there's a lot of value in having, some other revenue stream and I just think I think for certain people it's going to make a lot of sense. So all right, so we're going to take one more break, and when we come back we will talk a bit about podcasting. Be right back. Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. So our work has always been about keeping farming information as free and open to the public as we possibly can, and that won't change. One way in which we make that possible, though, is through advertising on podcasts like this, on our YouTube channel, on our forum, and so on. So if you are a small farm-related company selling seeds or tools or something growers could use, or if you're an organization putting on some conference or something else farm-related that I'm not thinking of, get in touch with us at Farmer Michelle at notogrowers.com. That's Farmer Michelle at notogrowers.com. Supporting us helps to grow this work and grow farmers. So we all thank you. Again, that email is farmermichelle at notogrowers.com, or you can find our contact information at notogrowers.com. All right. Thanks, you all. Enjoy the show. Okay, so Alex, this will be your third season, right? Third season co-hosting the Noto Market Garden podcast. Very excited about that. I love listening to the people that you choose and the questions that you choose. I'm fascinated and absolutely enthralled. And in terms of interviews, what is on your mind? Like, what are you sort of seeking out this season?
Yeah, Jesse, I think after last year, I'm not going to lie, I've had like a epiphany moment, right? After going through that struggle and kind of shifting our business and landing on our feet, I'm like, man, I had to figure out, how do other people survive? Like, how do people do this? Because it's like, I find this recurring thing happens. I talk to farmers and they say to me, they have this perception of other farms, of people, of other farmers being so much further ahead than them, of them being so pushed down, and them like not being worth it. And I feel like it's just negative talk that kind of happens when you do a lot of alone work, and especially combined with a lot of social media. So what I'm really trying to do is just talk to a lot of different small growers at different scales and try to expose the reality of small scale farming and show how are they surviving and how are they surviving with their specific small scale farm goals. As I said earlier, like is your goal to have a 20-acre farm where your family grows and stacked businesses, or is it a market garden where you supply supplements to the farm, to the people in your community? And like, what's successful and what make you happy is so different between all these different operations that I think I really want to help show what is success in different people's eyes. And, at the end of the day, what are people happy? What kind of work are people happy doing? Because I had a friend of mine talk to me, and one time he's like, Alex, man, before I knew you, I thought you were a millionaire. I thought you were making tens of thousands a week. I thought you were killing it. And it's like, well, I'm doing my best, but I'm just posting good marketing photos, trying to like look good for people who want to buy food, so people buy with their eyes, right? So it's so easy to get in this rut. So I'm really just trying to talk to people and kind of like break past the barriers of this idea of this perfect farm and really think, how do people survive? How do people make it? And how do you make it past the first 3 or 4 years? But how do you make it to year 20? And what the different things that people go through? Like, I interviewed a farm yesterday, and they are in, I think, year 13 or 14, right? And they've had different peaks and valleys in their businesses, parts where they're pushing really, really hard, making a lot of money, growing really fast, and then seeing how they rebound from that and then went back up, finding that happy medium. So trying to show people, like, the farms aren't static, we change, and what being successful at one year to another is, what does it really mean to you?
I love that. I feel like it's really, this business, like I said, is absolutely bananas. And it's one of those things that there are people that can do it successfully and survive. And I feel like there's things we can learn from them. There's a lot we can learn from people whose businesses don't survive, or who are just in the middle of it, or who are in that 5 or 10 year period where everybody's like, you'll be good at 5 or 10 years, and are still kind of like, I'm, it's still pretty hard. Or conversely, are like coming out of it. Like, I think there's such a range of experiences, because farm businesses are as dynamic as farms. Like, it's just a really, really complicated business. Everybody comes into it with a different amount of capital. Everybody comes into it with a different climate, different clientele, different competition. It is a really extraordinarily difficult and complicated and fascinating business, just from end to end.
Jesse, I totally agree with you. I often tell people that, like, people aren't starving because of lack of production in this country, right? There's food everywhere, and you're selling a commodity that is, if you have enough money, is available at most places. So, in a lot of communities, especially those who are in hard financial times, they, the first thing you drop is your food budget, right? The first thing you cut out. So it's definitely a hard business to be in, and depending on where you live, is going to really determine kind of the nature of your business and what you can do. Like, I would say our farm specifically, we have so much competition around us. We've now, it's forced us in a good way to become very precise in what we do and what we grow, and allows us to work with a bunch of other farms locally and deliver a great product to our local consumer. But I've talked to other growers who are in communities where the nearest farmer to them is an hour away, and they're feeding that, like, they're feeding, let's say, a population of 1,000 within a 25-minute radius of where they live. And what they grow and produce and what things are even possible there are totally different than, someone who's an urban farm in Vancouver to a rural farm in Minnesota. So I'm really excited to just kind of hear what those people need to succeed, and really, what joy they find in their business. Because besides just like growing food and making a living, farming, I don't know, for me is like the most fun thing in the world. And like you said, like there are so many other jobs that, like, I see, I'm like, oh, I could apply for that job and I'm qualified for this position, and it's 10 times as much money that I'm making growing turnips. But I'm like, but man, if I had to sit in that desk for like 8 hours a day and not be able to like just go and like grow a head of lettuce, oh, I would lose it. It would get under my skin. So, but there's so much value in the farm itself. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear from folks and just kind of figure out how they find balance in their life, how they keep it going. We're heading to year 13 for our farm, and I'm not gonna lie to you, man. Last year I hit probably the biggest wall I've hit my entire career. You can get knocked down, and you can put a lot into your business, but like, you keep saying, "Oh, I'll be good at year 5. I'll be good at year 10," and then at year 10 you have a disaster, and like all of that buildup of years of like hope and yeah, I mean, just hope and maybe on some level lying to yourself, and I'll be good at year 10. Then it all crashes down, and it can really put you in a bad position. So yeah, it's like, how do you motivate yourself, keep going? How do you like find the little things that keep you motivated, especially past that first decade?
I love that. Well, Alex, I very much look forward to this season of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. Let people know where they can find you, maybe on the Instagram or wherever you are posting.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Old City Acres. I post nothing serious. I almost resent the farm at this point. It's just fun farm memes and like things that make me laugh, and maybe like I had a bok choy once in a while. So if you enjoy some farm stuff, you might enjoy my page.
Nice. We will make sure to put that link in the show notes. And Alex, it has been amazing chatting with you. I always enjoy our conversations.
Oh, thanks, Jesse. I really appreciate being on the show with you.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Make sure you are subscribed to the No-Till Growers Network feed wherever you subscribe to podcasts, or our No-Till Growers podcast channel here at YouTube. In that way, you will not miss any of Alex's interviews. Also, please make sure you are subscribed or following wherever you are hearing this anyway, or watching, so you don't miss any of these dailies. Huge thanks to Willie Breeding for the theme music and everyone over there at No-Till Growers for their support. Speaking of support, the absolute best way to see this work keep going and growing, or just show your general approval, is to join over at patreon.com/no-till-growers, where I will be shouting out every new member this month. But also at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you get that same deal. So big shout outs today to, see who we got. Megan List. Oh, that's a convenient name, Megan. Love it. Gabriel Lopez Carrier, Blair B, and Stefan R. Huge thanks to everyone who supports us in whatever way that you can. This truly is like what keeps this thing going. So we really appreciate it. Otherwise, have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.